In 1967, a shadow hung over Elvis Presley. The king of rock and roll, once unstoppable, was struggling. His movies were failing, barely making money. His concerts were no longer filling large halls. By late 1967, it seemed like Elvis was at his lowest point. His contract with MGM, one of the big movie companies, was about to end. It looked like no major studio would want to work with him again, at least not for the money he thought he deserved. It was a dire situation and something had to change. That's when the Colonel had an idea. Elvis had made a few TV shows before, singing Christmas songs like everyone else, but this time was different. The Colonel, Elvis's manager, decided to try something new. Instead of the usual holiday tune show, he approached NBC, a big TV network, with a bold proposal. They would air a special show featuring Elvis, but not just any show. It would be a departure from the usual, something that showcased Elvis in a fresh light. The Colonel wanted to introduce viewers to the real Elvis Presley, not just the performer on stage, but this idea wasn't easy to sell. The Colonel had to fight his own doubts. However, he managed to win Elvis over. Elvis gave Binder, the new director hired by NBC, a lot of freedom to create the show he wanted. Binder had big ambitions. He scrapped the original idea of a traditional Christmas special. Instead, he envisioned something more real, more raw. Drawing from his experience with rock music shows and a lively Petula Clark special, Binder wanted to capture Elvis in a more natural setting. He imagined Elvis and a few musicians performing casually, almost as if they were just jamming together, right in front of a small crowd. At first, Elvis was excited but also terrified by this new concept. On the day of the taping, he was so nervous that Binder had to practically push him onto the stage. This new show, called Presents Elvis, aired on December 3, 1968. It mixed standard TV variety show elements with something fresh: Elvis performing in a small, intimate setting, surrounded by fans. The show featured Elvis in a black leather suit, playing songs both old and new. His performance was electrifying, fresh, dynamic, and powerful. Viewers were captivated not just by his music, but by the authenticity of the moment. This was Elvis reborn, showing fans why he was still a force to be reckoned with in music. The special ended with a new song, If I Can Dream, a song about hope and understanding. It was a bold statement, especially given the social changes happening at the time. The show was a massive success, drawing in 42% of all TV viewers that night, making it NBC's top-rated show of the season. For Elvis, it was more than just a TV success. It marked a turning point. He felt alive again, eager to perform live in front of audiences. His next stop was Las Vegas, where another big change was waiting. Kirk Kerkorian, a man who started as an airplane pilot and built an empire, was ready to bring Elvis to the biggest stage of all, the newly built International Hotel. This was going to be big, and everyone knew it. In the late 1960s, Elvis Presley faced a tough time. After serving in the army, he returned to find his music world had changed a lot. The cool, fresh sound that made him famous was now old-fashioned. New bands like the Beatles were taking over, and young people had new tastes. Elvis, once the king of rock and roll, felt left behind. His music had become softer, more polished, and less exciting. Many people thought he was out of touch, but there was a glimmer of hope. In December 1968, Elvis did a special on NBC. It was a comeback show meant to show the world that the king was still alive. To everyone's surprise, it worked. People loved it and Elvis looked vibrant again. This small victory gave him the courage to try something big, a live stage performance after 8 long years. Colonel Parker, Elvis's manager, thought a Las Vegas engagement would be perfect. The International Hotel was the biggest and most famous place to perform in the city. It was a huge stage and it would give Elvis the spotlight he craved, but there was a problem. Elvis was hesitant to open the hotel's new showroom. It was a risk. The new sound and lighting systems might not work well, and things could go wrong. Parker didn't want his star to take that chance alone. So he suggested getting someone else to try it first. Parker approached Barbra Streisand, a highly respected performer, but she wasn't interested. So he turned to Bill Miller, who suggested another star, Barbra Streisand's backup singer, Billie Joe Miller, but she wasn't available either. Finally, Parker settled on a lesser-known name, but with big ambitions, Bette Midler wasn't an option. Instead, it was another up-and-coming singer. But ultimately, it was Bill Miller's friend, singer and pianist, Bobby Rydell, who was not going to do it. And then it fell to Bill Miller's other choice, another up-and-comer, but not a star yet. It was actually Sonny Buono, but he wasn't the right fit either. Ultimately, it was Bill Miller himself who stepped in, agreeing to open the show. He knew it was a chance to shine and prove himself. Elvis, relieved to have someone to share the risk, agreed to let Bill Miller open the show. Elvis would follow, taking the main spot. This decision allowed Elvis to focus on his own performance without the pressure of opening night jitters. As Elvis prepared for his return to live performing, he knew this was a big moment. For years, he had been stuck in a rut, performing bland songs and avoiding the rock and roll energy that once defined him. The music world had changed, and so had the audience. Elvis felt the weight of being a legend who was supposed to be relevant but wasn't. He wanted to prove that he still had it, that he could captivate a crowd like he used to. The idea of performing in Las Vegas was both exciting and terrifying. It was the biggest challenge he had faced in years. Could he still pull off a spectacular show? Could he win back the fans who had lost faith in him? Elvis was determined to find out. With the support of his team and a newfound sense of purpose, he stepped back into the spotlight, ready to show the world that the king was back. In the late 1960s, Elvis Presley's path seemed to lead to a dead end. His movies were not doing well and people didn't want to see him in concerts as much as before, but there was a glimmer of hope. Live concerts were becoming popular again and top artists were making lots of money from one-night shows. Elvis saw an opportunity. At that time, interest in old rock and roll music was growing. Singers who had made hits in the 1950s, like Chuck Berry and Little Richard, started playing concerts again. Radio stations began playing classic rock songs. In 1969, a funny band called Sha Na Na, known for doing old doo-wop songs in a silly way, became unexpectedly popular at the Woodstock Festival. People were feeling tired of complicated music and wanted something simple and energetic again. Elvis didn't want to just be a nostalgic act, though. He had big dreams for his Las Vegas show. He imagined himself on stage with lots of musicians, a big rhythm band, 2 groups of singers, and the biggest orchestra Las Vegas had ever seen. This idea was very different from what Colonel Parker, his manager, wanted. The Colonel thought about putting Elvis on stage with showgirls and fancy dance numbers. One day, Elvis had a strong feeling during a dream. In his dream, he was performing in Las Vegas, surrounded by many musicians. Excited by this dream, Elvis called the Colonel the next morning. He told the Colonel about his vision of a big musical show. But the Colonel had already made plans for something else. Elvis, feeling strong for the first time, told the Colonel he would either do the show his way or not do it at all. This was a big moment. For the first time, Elvis stood up to the Colonel and said no. With this newfound determination, Elvis took charge of his comeback. He wanted to create a show that was truly his own. He refused to be controlled by others and wanted to make music that made him happy. This decision marked a turning point. Elvis was ready to take control of his career and show the world what he truly wanted to do. In the end, Elvis's boldness paid off. He managed to create a unique and exciting show in Las Vegas, one that combined his love for music with a grand orchestra and a lively performance style. This comeback not only revived his career but also showed that sometimes following your heart and being brave can lead to great success. Elvis proved that even when things seem tough, you can make your own path and shine bright.